Alright, here's our video on drawing ray diagrams. First I'll look at spherical mirrors, and then we'll look at some lenses. First we'll look at the concave mirror. Remember, it's a converging mirror. So the four main rays that we're going to look at is a ray that comes from the object that is traveling parallel to the principal axis, will reflect back through the focal point. The second one is a ray that goes through the focal point first before it hits the mirror, reflects back parallel to the principal axis. Those two rays are sort of opposite of each other. The third ray comes from the object and it passes through the center of curvature. That one bounces right back on itself. And the last one that we can look at is a ray that hits the mirror at the vertex. When that one reflects, it is just going to go back at the same angle. So let me draw my picture. I have my principal axis. I have my concave mirror. I'm going to draw my object right here. I'm going to make my focal point right here. My center of curvature is right here. Now, things aren't going to be perfect because this is all freehand, but I'm going to do my best to see how we use these rays. So we're going to, first one, go parallel to the principal axis. When this one reflects, it passes through the focal point. The second one, remember, is the opposite. First it goes through the focal point before it hits the mirror, and that one is going to reflect back parallel to the principal axis. The next one is going to go through the center of curvature and kind of bounce back on itself. I am not a good drawer, am I? So I did kind of fake that a little bit because I knew they all want to kind of intersect at the same location. This is really where all the light rays are intersecting. And so I'm going to stop right here just because my drawing isn't that pretty, but because all the light rays that reflected intersected there, this is where I would find my image. Notice some things about the image. The image is inverted. It also looks smaller. Let's look at the ray diagram from your book. It's a little bit better. And you see the four rays, all four rays, because they drew better and, they probably had some help. Everything intersected right at this point. You see the image, it's upside down, and of course it's a little bit smaller. So that is for the concave mirror, where the object is beyond the focal point. I'm going to try to draw for you a picture for what it would look like if we put our object closer to the mirror than the focal point. So again, I'm going to start with my principal axis, my mirror. I'm going to say, here's my focal point, here's my center of curvature. Now, the rays end up being drawn a little bit differently when my object is closer to the mirror than the focal point. So, first I could start off with a light ray that appeared to go through the focal point. When this one reflects, it's going to reflect back parallel to the principal axis. And the one that goes from in parallel to the principal axis is going to reflect back and go through the focal point. And finally, one that appears to have come from the center of curvature, when it reflects back, will just reflect back on itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to trace, notice that none of these light rays seem to, this is the center of curvature one, none of them look like they're going to intersect on this side of the mirror, so we have to trace them back and see where they seem to intersect. And they appear to intersect behind the mirror, and this is where my image forms. Notice my image is upright, it's enlarged, and also notice, of course, it would be virtual. You might remember back to class that I showed you those 3 pictures of the candle in the candle that was reflected in the mirror. What I've shown you are the first 2 pictures. The first 2 pictures were mirrors of a concave, or were pictures of concave mirrors. The first, the object was further away from the mirror than the focal point, and so you saw a smaller upright image. The second one was, it was a smaller inverted image. The second one was a concave mirror, but the image ended up being enlarged, but it was upright and it was a virtual image. So let's move on to convex mirror. Remember that a convex mirror is going to be one that is a diverging mirror, and so all these images are going to be virtual, like the past one that I just did. So again, the light rays will be done a little bit differently because of the fact that it's a diverging mirror. So first of all, if we have a light ray coming from the object and it travels in parallel to the principal axis, it will actually reflect back, appearing to come from the focal point. Remember that that's because the focal point is behind the mirror, because it's a diverging mirror. That's why we say it appears that it's going to be coming from the focal point. The second ray, which is the reverse of this one, is going to appear to be going towards the focal point, which is behind the mirror, but of course it's going to hit the mirror before it hits the focal point, and so when it reflects back, it'll reflect back parallel to the principal axis. Finally, a ray from the object that goes through the center of curvature bounces back on itself, and a ray that hits the mirror at the vertex will reflect at the same angle. So let's try to do this drawing. Again, principal axis, I have my convex mirror. Here is going to be my focal point, and also, let's extend this, my center of curvature. And I'm going to put my object right here. My first light ray is going to come in parallel to the axis, and now when it reflects, it looks like it came from the focal point. So the light ray that looks like it's going towards the focal point, it's kind of hard to just eyeball, is going to reflect back parallel to the principal axis, and the light ray that looks like it's going towards the center of curvature is going to reflect back on itself. Again, I have 3 light rays coming off of the mirror, and none of them look like that they're going to intersect with each other. So we trace them all back. And again, I didn't do a great job, but basically here is where we see our image, approximately there. I'll show you a better picture from the book in a minute. So it's upright, it's smaller, and of course it's a virtual image. And so notice that that's how we could tell the difference between a virtual image for the concave mirror and a virtual image for the convex mirror is the size of the image itself. Let's look at the picture in the book, which is a little bit better. You see the light rays again. Granted, this is a better picture. You see the image, it is smaller, it's behind the mirror. Because this is a diverging mirror, it's not going to produce a real image. Now let's talk about converging lenses. For the lenses, we're only going to look at a couple of the different light rays. We're going to just look at 3. A ray that comes into the lens parallel to the principal axis will pass through the focal point on the other side of the lens. Because lenses have 2 curved surfaces, there's a focal point on either side of the lens. A ray that goes through the lens at the principal axis is undeflected, and then the ray that goes through the focal point and then passes through the lens will go parallel. So this time, the first and the third rays are the ones that are sort of complementary to each other. Let's see if we can use these rays and see how a converging lens might produce an image. The first case that we're going to do is going to be for the object to be beyond the focal point of the lens. So I'm going to put a focal point on either side, and here's my object. So the first light ray that I'm going to do is going to come in parallel to the principal axis, and then when it goes through the lens, it will pass through the focal point. The second ray is going to just go right through the middle of the lens and then is undeflected. And so I'm having a hard time drawing my lines. It's not very nice, but if I was an artist, maybe I wouldn't be teaching physics. This last ray goes through the focal point first, and then it comes out parallel. Okay, so with my not so great drawing, we see that an image is going to be somewhere around here. And this image is real, and it's inverted. Real images are always going to be inverted. You can kind of figure that out because the magnification is minus s prime over s, and if they're real, s prime is bigger than 0, which means the magnification is always going to be negative. It's hard to say if this image is bigger or smaller than my my object, and so we're just going to leave it with real and inverted. And here is a picture of the ray diagram done a little bit more neatly. Keep in mind that this was the picture where the object was beyond the focal point. So let's see if we can look and see what it would look like if the object was within the focal point. Alright, so let's do this. So I have my lens, my 2 focal points, and so here is my object. First I'm going to imagine the light ray coming from the focal point. Will end up going parallel to the principal axis, and one that goes through the center will actually be undeflected. And if I do one that comes in parallel, then it goes through the focal point. Notice none of these really intersect each other. So if we trace them all backwards, we actually see an image would be here. This would be a virtual image. And so when you place the object even for a converging lens, if it's closer to the lens than the focal point, it actually doesn't produce a image, it produces a virtual image. Finally, we're going to look at diverging lenses. We're going to, if we, our three rays that we're going to do, because diverging lenses are a little bit different, if the ray's traveling parallel to the principal axis, it will appear to have originated at the focal point after passing through the lens. A ray that intersects the lens at the principal axis will travel undeflected. An ray that appears to be headed for the far focal point will travel parallel to the principal axis after passing through the lens. So, alright, let's try to do our diverging lens. Here's our lens, and here are our two focal points. Here is our object. Okay, our first light ray comes in parallel to the principal axis, but it's going to, once it goes through the lens, appear to have originated at the focal point. The second line is going to appear to be heading for the far focal point, and so when it emerges from the lens, it is parallel to the principal axis, and the last light ray is the one that goes right through the center. If we trace all these back, they actually appear to sort of intersect right here, and that is where our image is formed. It's virtual and it's upright. It's also smaller. You might ask yourself what virtual images are, because the nature of a virtual image for a lens is that you can't put it on a screen, because the light rays don't actually intersect at that location. But the way that you can actually view them is if you would sort of come, and you might have done this in lab, if you sort of looked from over here, look through the lens, you might see the image. You can actually see it through the lens. So it's something you can see, but you can't actually put it on a screen. So that's what makes it a little bit different. All right, and so I think I have one slide that shows you a prettier picture of the diverging lens, and that is it. So hopefully this helps a little bit. We don't really do a lot of ray diagrams, but sometimes they're kind of nice to see how they work, maybe to make a guess about where an image might appear, and it's just nice to know how these images are produced that you see in your book.